Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Saturday afternoon. Very sorry. So we have two amazing speakers today from Unicorn Startups. We have Vivek Iyer, who's VP of Product Management at Darwinbox, and we have Nityanjay Kumar, who's VP for Payments at Zenoti. So I request both of you to take a seat and we'll have a quick chat. So this event is part of our MTech program that's being run at IIT Hyderabad, a 2 years exclusive program for product managers and aspiring startup founders. So today's session will be moderated by Mr. Prakash Shilla, who's a technology transfer officer and head for our product labs. So we'll have like a quick introduction from Vivek and Nityanjay first for 5 minutes, and then we'll head on to the panel. Over to you, sir.
Hi, can everybody hear? Okay. Yeah, hi, my name is Vivek and I work at Darwinbox currently as the Vice President of Product Management. A few things about me, I mean, how I started the product journey overall. I initially started my career, I was about at 2004 time frame. I graduated from my MBA at IIM Calcutta and we decided, I wanted to build a career in software because that was what appealed to me the most. At that time, software product management was still very much in its infancy. And what I did was I sort of initially dabbled in, what a company here called Virtusa, which is still there. I guess a lot of you know about it. So what they basically focused on was more around implementing and doing engineering for, independent software vendors or ISVs, as you call them. So what we ended up doing was, working with a lot of companies like Pegasystems that you see today was a client of Virtusa back in the day, and Vimiet, ultimately what is now as OpenText, right, was also part of the Virtusa sort of ecosystem. So learning from such organizations, I ended up building a career in understanding software product management in a wide variety of ecosystems, namely in content management, rules engine development, and also what ultimately became a sort of enterprise marketing management and CRM. So I spent a good chunk of time. I moved to the US as part of that exercise, and I started working with American products. And at some point in time, I sort of moved to a company called Kony, which is a mobile application development platform, which is, and I spent about 10 years there. I did a lot of product management pertaining to developer tools, right? Which is essentially related to enterprise middleware and how do you develop applications. So Kony's whole proposition was the capability to build mobile applications with a single code base for iOS, Android, web, desktop, and so on and so forth. And we did a chunk of good work there. And after that, I sort of moved on to Salesforce and spent a good chunk of time, talking about building vertical solutions for CRM as part of the Salesforce ecosystem. So spent about 2.5 years there, and then now I'm at Darwinbox. So the entire product management journey has been, I'm very passionate about enterprise software because that's what all I have done in my entire life. And it's a very different kind of persona. It's a very different kind of customer. You have a lot of intellectual depth that you need to go into, especially when it comes to designing the product. And we'll talk a little bit more about it. It's very interesting space, and and I have seen the transition from on-premise to SaaS, how it has sort of matured. What are the challenges you face in on-premise, and how SaaS sort of just swats everything and makes everything very simple and easy to manage. So I think that's a little bit about my story. Yeah, happy to answer any questions, but yeah, that's my story.
So, Mrityunjay, a little bit about yourself.
Okay, sure. It's on, right? You can hear me? Okay, awesome. Yeah, so my name is Nityanjay. As I was introduced, I have gone by multiple names depending on which country I have been. So right now I'm going by MJ. When I was in China, I was called Kuma. which used to be a very familiar word there. Of course, it was very different. For me, I had no idea. In US, it was Kumar. And of course, when I was in school, it was Mrityu, and my parents would be like, why are they calling you Mrityu? And somebody will call up and say, hey, where is Mrityu? Okay, fine. That's a philosophical question. So I have gone through multiple cycles. And when I look at my career, it sort of have gone in circles in a way, because I've started out with things, I have ended same place. I've joined Microsoft 3 times, which means I've left them 2 times, actually 3 times, because finally I left them and said, okay, enough. And I came back to India, started doing something of my own at that point in 2012 is when I came back. I started my career a long time back, 96. When I said 2004, I said, okay, yeah, it's very recent. So 2012 is when I said, okay, fine, enough of software. And most of the work that I have done in software is started out with engineering, bulk of engineering, lots of firmware development. That time when I graduated, high-speed networks were coming on, and like ATM networks and some of those things were there, lots of ITUT standard implementation. So pretty cutting edge technology. I always thought, oh, I'm a great engineer. And then around, I would say 2007, 2006, 2007, and I was here for 3 years in Hyderabad in a company called Sum Total Systems. And when I was going through that cycle, what I realized was, you know what? It doesn't matter how smart an engineer you are. Ultimately, what you are building is something that somebody has to take and pay for it. And so that was for me sort of a revelation, even though it's a very obvious thing. And again, I'm not an MBA graduate like him. So probably MBA gets taught all of these things. I was never taught. I was an engineering grad. But that was a revelation for me to say, oh, so that means just because I'm the smartest engineer in the world, even if I can become that, my career is not going to go very fast, very far. Then I said, okay, fine. For that, then that means I have to experience a bunch of other stuff. So then I went into QA, got into program management, product management. Good thing about Sum Total was I went around the world and then did all kinds of roles in all kinds of places. And that gave me a very, very good understanding of, okay, so then I realized, okay, it's not like then the other guy like product management, which these days seems to be the buzz. Okay, product managers are the guys who are CEO of the company, a CEO of the product, and they will take the product forward. So that gave me the perspective, okay, it's not one guy. It's like, it has to be everybody, but then people who have that well-rounded perspective, who understand engineering, who understand quality, who understand product, and who understand business are the ones who are going to sort of conquer the market. So for me, anyway, 2012, I came back and said, okay, realization, okay, enough software. I'm not going to do software. Software is boring, not interesting. I came back, I said, I'll do career coaching for people, working professionals, technology people, trying to get them to where they want to be. And it turned out that lots of engineers wanted to be product managers. So I started teaching some things. I was associated with a startup which was teaching these people online, and did a bunch of those things. Didn't really work out. Career coaching is something that doesn't pay enough. Definitely not like software. So then I said, okay, fine, bahut ho gaya. 2016 is when I came to Hyderabad, joined a company here called Zenoti. And when I joined, it was, of course, I was doing these roles, which was, as I said, like I've never sort of compartmentalized myself to say, oh, I am doing this role. I was doing what I called a product management, but I was doing a bunch of other things along with it wherever I was doing, even when I was in Delhi. So when I came into Zenoti, it was product management role that I got in. I was leading the product management function, but lo and behold, like any other startup, there was, oh, the engineering head did something that he started doing services because somebody left in services. Then he went there, then it was like, hey, why don't you do engineering? I said, no, I don't want to do engineering. Of course, I had no choice. I said, fine, I'll do engineering and product management together. Did it for a couple of years, then we hired somebody. Then after that, I've started moving more towards, last 2-3 years have been around moving towards business. Because again, as I said, unless you know all of these things, and ultimately to make money, you need to understand all of these pieces, is what my learning is. And today also, when we talk about product management, even though this is about product management, I would reiterate that product managers have to be business managers. They have to be lots of things managers, but definitely business managers. They should also be like engineering managers, and they should be good engineers. Somebody we were talking about, right? Okay, so, okay, I don't want to do engineering, or I can't do engineering. I want to be product manager. That can't get you a good product management position. You have to be a good engineer. You have to be a good quality professional. You will become a good product manager. You will learn other skills. So that's what my journey has been. And again, it is cyclical in multiple ways. As I said, I keep going to same company and keep coming back from the same company. I have, of course, I was a student. I started teaching in the middle. Now again, I'm a student. I mean, I'm doing my job, but I'm a PhD student here. I'm a part-time student. I'm doing PhD here in SERC. So that is also a cycle. Overall, as I look at, as I said, as we go forward, we'll touch about some of these other aspects of things as well. But whenever you are looking at anything which says product management, frankly, take it with a pinch of salt, because the definition is not clear. And I think in my LinkedIn, when I was posting, I said, I'll talk about ship of thesis. I don't know how many of you have heard about that thought experiment where, okay, so there was this, I'll tell the story. Sorry, I can take one more minute. So this is a thought experiment. You can read up in Wikipedia. So basically there was this ship which went, conquered lots of things, well-known ship. Everybody knows, oh, great ship. It is in a harbor, it is there. Now, some parts were not really working out, so they replaced some parts. So of course, they replaced one or two parts, it is still ship of thesis. Now, slowly everything, every single part was replaced. Is it still ship of thesis? Because there is nothing physical there which is same as the original ship of thesis. Now, you can think whichever way you want to think. Maybe it is ship of thesis or it is not. If you feel it is not, then there must have been some point at which you pulled something out. It was ship of thesis by that point, but you pulled something out and it stopped being ship of thesis. What is that? So essentially, again, it's a philosophical thought experiment. You can keep thinking about what it is, and why I'm telling it is, one, because I feel it is cool. But the other part is, if you go back to product management, you go back to SaaS also actually. What is SaaS? I mean, I was talking to PMs in my organization. I am telling them, okay, so what are the examples around you which you will say it is a SaaS software? Okay, is WhatsApp SaaS product? People have different opinions. I don't know. I'm pretty sure people will have different opinion here. Is Swiggy, Zomato, is that a SaaS product? Many of you will say yes. I would say no. So what is the essence of these words? Similarly, product manager. Okay, what is a product manager? What does the product manager do? You go around 20 companies, you ask, what do you exactly do on a day-to-day basis? All product managers will be telling you different things. I can bet on that because I have done it because of my career management and teaching and all. I've done that kind of conversation. So what is the essence of product manager? What is it that you will ultimately, if you take that away, you are not a product manager. But you may be doing all kinds of things, and he must have done all kinds of crazy things, and everything was told as, hey, you are a product manager, therefore you have to do it. I had to do it. So what's the essence? Well, it's important to try to find that essence. Like a strip of thesis, you may not be able to find, but I think the quest is important. So as we talk about SaaS, as we talk about SaaS product management, just keep in mind that whatever we will talk about is just one flavor, one perspective, my perspective, his perspective. You will have a perspective to ask question, but probably the essence, it's very hard to somebody to tell you the essence. You have to figure it out on your own. You may continue to be on that quest. So please stay on that quest. So sorry, it went into philosophy.
No problem.
That's where I'll stop.
Thanks, Mrityunjay. So yeah, product management as a discipline, I think if you look at it, several years ago, it was when software was not a dominant force. We've seen people build physical stuff. Then we went to see desktop software, web-based software, client-server software. Now we're talking about SaaS software. So somewhere in between, this role called product management started appearing and becoming bigger and bigger and becoming more prominent. So now we are hearing a lot about the SaaS product management. So just want to understand from your perspective, your essence of your understanding of what is the SaaS? How is it different from the regular product management versus SaaS? Are they different or are the same, or just want to get your views on it?
I can start and maybe Vivek can add a bit. So again, as I said, the essence, it's hard to find. Everybody may have their own sense of what the essence is. When I look at internal product management, I think ultimately the reason why this role came up, I feel, again, the way it has evolved, is people did realize, and definitely that is true in software, that while there are lots and lots of different pieces that need to be assembled together in order to get something in somebody's hand so that they find it of value and then pay for it. Ultimately, that is the goal of every organization, right? You want to make money. Every software product, everything that is there because you want to make money. But in software, you will, okay, engineer will build it. QA will certify the quality. Legal will say, okay, good to go, or they will say, oh, I have to compliance requires this much. Lots of people will come in, but then who is that one individual who has to hold on to everything and go down, chase down whatever rabbit hole it needs to chase in order to be able to say, okay, now I have something which is of value to some customer out there who will go and pay for it. Now that role was very fluffy. It wasn't really there. Initially, you would say, okay, there will be a project manager. Sometimes it will be engineering manager. But then slowly this role came about, okay, of a product manager, which again, sort of jack of all trades, knows lots of things. But then there are some areas that they are masters. But definitely they know lots and lots of areas. I've seen product managers, you will marvel at the kind of breadth of knowledge that they have. I was in Microsoft and payment space. And there will be these product managers who will understand so much of nitty-gritty details of the legal aspects of Brazil payments. And nobody would understand anything, and this guy will be talking. Why? And not because this guy was a legal expert or anything, but he has spent enough time with the legal team to get Brazil payments getting done, and then he picks it up. And so slowly they will pick up enough knowledge and become. But I think that's what that owner, that's why the CEO of the product and those things come, because somebody who holds the ball. But now as we get into SaaS, first of all, as I said, SaaS itself is I don't know what you call SaaS versus cloud. For example, there are cloud software. Is every cloud software a SaaS software? Right. So there are multiple flavors of it. I think operative assumption we could make on SaaS is, okay, it's a cloud software where the way you monetize it is through some sort of a recurring subscription basis. If you pay everything upfront, nobody has any obligation of, okay, keep doing something, otherwise I'll not pay you. Is really the kind of piece that sort of distinguishes a SaaS from a other kind of a cloud software that is there. But taking this operating assumption of SaaS, when I look at product manager in this space, I think one of the aspects that comes very, very clearly out is, since the software, you are a user, you have the software in your hands, but most of the gut of that software is in the cloud, the assumption is, okay, if there is something wrong, you will fix it immediately and give it to me. That assumption was not there in a premised software or any other software, because the delivery mechanism is instantaneous. And so the cycle, and if you have read these books around product management and all, there's a cycle of a concept of the product, and then figure out what you want to build, and then you go build it, and then you do a beta, then you do a general availability, and all of those. Microsoft used to do 3 years planning and all of those kind of things. Just goes for a toss. So as a product manager, a regular, whatever the regular product manager might mean, may have had time. A SaaS product manager doesn't have time. Technically, they may have to ship a product in 24 hours. They figured out a problem. They said, okay, this is what I need to do. I go figure out, design this, that, all these things. I may be ready to go next day. Now the cycle gets squeezed, of course. If you do that every day, and then you'll go mad and you may not be a good product manager on your own. But that cycle compression becomes a problem. I think the other aspect that becomes a problem, and we'll touch upon that as we go forward, is also the product manager has to keep the cost in mind. Because in earlier world, it will be like, okay, you build a software, you give it to somebody, there is an IT team there, they will put it on their machine, their boxes, get something done. And machine will be very expensive because you need lots of power. That doesn't factor in because you charge for the software, you walked away. Here, since you are hosting it, you are giving service, right? That's another aspect that people don't understand. Product management is in a way, it is like, it doesn't make sense. In this world, SaaS is a software as a service. It is a service. I'm delivering a service. What is a product manager doing when I'm delivering a service? I mean, it doesn't make sense in that sense. So therefore, the way I want to look at it is, product manager really is an experience manager. In a SaaS world, the experience that the individual gets, that is the product for them. For me, for example, I take care of the payment side in Zenoti, and we have a large global sort of footprint. About 95% of our customers are using payments solutions that we have globally. And so if you look at it, for them, for us, payment software stack is whatever code we wrote. But then for them, payment is not that. Payment is, they get a device, they use the device, that device gets used, the shipping didn't happen, that is product for them. Shipping didn't happen, PM poor guy will say, okay, what do I do? Somebody shipped it. But it is a part of the product experience that they have in mind. So SaaS makes a product manager's job in that sense much more difficult. While a regular traditional product manager might have it, I would not say easy, but easier than a SaaS product manager in that sense. I think some of those aspects we need to keep in mind. We'll tease out some of those as we will go out. I think one aspect to keep in mind is, many of you may be thinking, when you talk about product management and SaaS and all, you may be thinking about a consumer product. We look at our phone, or look at Swiggy, Zomato, all these. Like, you are the individual who is buying it, and you are the one who is using it. Whereas there's a whole category, and that's where actually SaaS, if you look at India and the startups in India who are doing well, including Darwinbox, Zenoti, and others, they are enterprise SaaS product, which is essentially B2B, which is we sell to an organization, which then gives it to their own user. Of course, end user is an end user, but end user is not paying. It's like a business which is paying. And so there are lots of different nuances that come in, which don't come in a consumer one. Of course, consumer has a different one. So the B2B, B2C, and you may have heard of it. And there are these distinction of, okay, I'm a B2B product manager. I'm a B2C product manager. Of course, SaaS, non-SaaS, most of the thing is SaaS. So I think some of those things will tease out, and I think maybe if you can sort of detail it out as we go along, I think that will be good, because that will be very, very important for most people to understand.
Yeah, probably you can touch upon some of the SaaS product management trends as you are touching, as you talk about your experiences.
Yeah, sure. I think, thank you, Mrityunjay. Lovely insights there. I think the question around just the trends, right? I think in SaaS, B2B, B2C, there are multiple players, right? I think on the B2B angle, what happens is typically, in my view, product management is all about, what is your addressable market? What market are you going after? And who is your persona, right? So that is, in my view, a very first principle kind of thinking that you have to apply. So the way B2B and B2C becomes different is now B2B, your product is going to be used by an employee of an organization, and B2C is used by yourself as like a member of the public, right? So that's a fundamental difference. So because of which, the first principle in which you attack the problem's design would change, right? So for example, if you take a company like Darwinbox or Salesforce, so Darwinbox, for those who know, we work as an HRMS platform, right? So we have to keep the HR business partner front and center, right? So keeping that and optimizing that would be our focus area. So it's almost like they are front and center in all of our conversations. So the trends in SaaS that sort of augment, that kind of conversation are many. I think the one thing that we all have benefited from is the rapid, development in the whole cloud ecosystem, so to speak, right? So we have newer services coming. We have AWS coming. So back in the day, if you look at my previous employer, Salesforce, right? So they were the first sort of people who said, there's no install required. You need to just hit a browser and you can run your entire software that way. There's no, like Nityanjay was explaining, there is a service that you're providing, as a result of which you don't have to worry about maintenance. There's no, if you were to buy SAP, you have to wait for an install from SAP or a service pack. That would take a bunch of time, right? So now there is none. But Salesforce had to build a lot of the underlying infrastructure themselves, right? There was no AWS, there was no Azure that could spin open a service, right? So, but fundamentally, that has changed, I think, in the last 7 or 8 years, where we now have these fantastic infrastructure providers that provide and take away a lot of the complexity of installing and providing services. And my view is that trends are going even further and further, right? A lot of the services that we had to build are now available. I mean, if you look at some of the technical aspects around, Kubernetes or containerization, you may have heard these terms in the technical ecosystem. Those were some things that we had to build by ourselves previously. Now you have a capability where one particular piece of software can work across clouds or services very easily. So these trends are really helping. I mean, a lot of the AI ML that we had to do now are sort of available in the stack as services. So my suggestion or my advice to people who are sort of interested in product management is to keep a very eager eye out, right, on what is happening in development terms in the underlying services that are being provided by these infrastructure providers like Azure or AWS, Google Cloud, and then see how you can improve the HR business partner's life, right? So essentially always tie back to the persona, and at the same time, look at the addressable market. Say, for example, in the HRMS ecosystem, let's say the addressable market is a few $1 billion, right? Now, how do you take a larger part of the pie, right? So just to give you an example, today, so I don't know, have you heard of the story where somebody asked the Coca-Cola CEO who's the biggest competitor, right? And the person said it's not Pepsi. He said actually it's somebody who's drinking water, right? Because Coca-Cola wanted to get into the business of being whatever you're going to drink, it has to be a Coca-Cola product, right? So if you think about it from a Darwinbox perspective, so what does the HR business partner do, right? If he or she, for example, uses any other software that's not Darwinbox, right? Then that is something that I believe is money I'm leaving at the table, right? So that is something that I would like to allow for my tool to have that solution out of the box, right? So that he or she, maybe she wants a visitor management system, so that if somebody comes into the office, you want to be able to build a card and allow the person in, manage like an OTP kind of system, perhaps, right? And maybe I don't have that solution, right? But maybe I provide a platform by which somebody can just build a simple form where they can call an OTP service, which again can be provided by a lot of these Amazon, underlying AWS Azure services. And then you basically try to build that into the Darwinbox ecosystem. So she spends her entire day in our tool, and you try to sort of optimize basis that. So overall, I mean, to cut a long story short, I think continuously focus on persona. Make sure that you understand what your addressable market is. And if your persona is doing anything for her work outside of your tool, in my view, you're sort of perhaps losing an opportunity. So try to optimize those opportunities and make the most of it. I think that's what I would say as far as trends are concerned. Yeah, please go ahead. Okay, very good, very good. Thank you. So yeah, persona. So let us say what that means. It's a very common term you may have heard in the ecosystem. For example, in the case of Darwinbox, right? Who is the Darwinbox? Like is an HRMS platform, which basically means that you need software so that you can hire somebody, right? There is a recruitment process. What is a recruitment process? You would need to source resumes. You would need to conduct interviews. You would need to shortlist. You would need to score people on interviews, and then ultimately you would have to select a person, and then you would have to roll that. So that's like a recruitment process. Then after that, you have to onboard the person. Then once the person has been onboarded, meaning that you take their Aadhaar card or their passport or whatever details you have to do, they are now part of them. Then you have to figure out their compensation. Then they have to payroll. You have to figure out how they get paid, right? Then you have to figure out their performance management system. So essentially what I'm trying to say is there is a wide variety of things that our software does, right? But who's front and center in using this, right? So for example, if you take any of our customers, for example, Glenmark Pharmaceuticals is a large customer for us, or Paytm, what have you. I mean, the HR person who is running recruitment, the recruiter, right? That would be a key persona for us, because that person is using the process day in and day out, right? So when I write my spec for a recruitment process, I need to say, keep that person in mind. What is she going to do, right? What does she want to do? So it is my job as a product manager to interview as many people to understand the psyche and the problems that they may face, and I have to ensure that it is a flawless experience as far as it is he or she is concerned while she's using my tool to hire people, right? So that she then becomes my persona. So pretty much any spec, let us say I call the persona as say Revati. Revati is the persona who's using the software. So everything I write, every use case or every spec I write, I keep Revati front and center. So Revati would want the CVs to be parsed in such a way that I can always figure out whether a particular CV has the best fitment to the requirements of that. So that identification of Revati is what is the persona. Does that make sense? So it is a person who is going to be heavily using your software as you sort of move through the cycle. And it also, I mean, there's a whole notion of design here, right? So when you build a wireframe, when you work with the UX team, the persona becomes front and center. You have to always think about, is it easy for Revati to use it on mobile, or is it easy for her to use it on web, or what channels would she want to use, like Slack or Teams? So we have to try and optimize and understand these notions. Sorry, long-winded answer.
So you brought out a very interesting stream, which is becoming very strong in the product management world, which is the design thinking stream, which is playing a very dominant role. At the same time, you're also seeing some of the deep technologies like AML and all that coming into picture now. So how does that trend impact product management?
Yeah, well, I think a lot. I mean, to be honest, as any PM, in my view, you have to keep thinking about AI/ML as a scenario, because even yesterday I was at a customer, a prospect was interested in buying a software. If I go and tell them, we have the capability of AI/ML, but I don't have like a right scenario or something like that, it just dampens your sale very quickly, right? So essentially, for example, in the case of AI/ML, we think of scenarios in every module, like recruitment. Going back to the question you had asked, like, so what would make Revati's life faster or more efficient? Is for example, for me to peruse through the 50 applicants, parse their CV, and then say, these are the top 5. Then Revati would then select, yes, this is indeed number 1, and I agree, but number 2 should actually be number 5. And then so basically she then trains the model basis her recommendations, so that the next time the model becomes better, the ranking that she gets is better. And so AI/ML is very important in that case. So even a lot of companies, for example, if you go back to a persona and she wants to figure out what is the probability of a person to leave, right? It's a very big concern for companies, right? They don't want people to leave because you're investing in hiring people, taking them next level. So if you want them to not leave, you have to predict, what are the reasons why she would leave. So there could be like a thing like salary may be incorrect, or maybe she doesn't have the right kind of job. Maybe her interests and skills lie elsewhere. So making all that matching, you can try to arrive at an attrition percentage that could also have a good chunk of AI/ML involved, and basis that managers can take decisions about doing like job rotations and things like that. So yeah.
So as a product management professional, again, one key skill I see, one of the challenging skills I see is the decision making skill, because that's, I think, a product manager is there in the center of things, taking decisions, and it becomes even more challenging in a SaaS environment, because as simple as that, there is a multi-tenancy environment. You're a B2B, there's multi-tenant, and then you're giving a feature to X. Now there's a client whose users for the same use for the same feature. There's a client who are CXOs who are willing to pay your CEO some 3x the per user per rate. And now you need to make a decision on the feature, because if you satisfy them, then these 100 people who are using this are going to get affected. So there are a lot of, I would say, day in and day out, you'll be having so many interesting stories and interesting strategies you must have adopted to ensure that the product integrity is there while you're serving your customers. So do you want to share some of your real life stories that makes it make the whole aspect more clear?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. Okay. So let me just first tell about Zenoti a bit. So we are what we call as enterprise vertical SaaS product. And so what that means is we are enterprise, which is B2B product, and we are vertical in the sense that, unlike Darwinbox, for example, which is a horizontal, and we'll get into that and maybe we can help explain that later. But vertical meaning we are very focused in one segment, and in our case, it is beauty and wellness. And some of you may not realize, at least I never realized before I joined the company, that beauty and wellness is a space which requires software. I always thought, okay, I walk in, I get my hair cut, I walk away, fine, okay, I get the money, life is good, where is software there? But essentially what we build is an ERP for that particular vertical, which means whatever software is required to manage the business, grow the business, all of these will be done by various modules that we have built. And that is what we have been around for almost 11 years now. We started out with we like to call it SaaS native, in that sense, cloud native. First line of code was written keeping AWS in mind, which people don't do, because people write software, then they figure out how to put it to cloud. So in that sense, pretty complex software. All ERP softwares are actually complex because reason there are so many different kinds of needs that are out there. And you want to say that I have one copy of the software, you will run that. and that one copy will run for India scenarios, Middle East scenarios, South Africa scenarios, US scenarios, UK scenarios, Australia, New Zealand. We have 59 countries, one code base which runs everywhere, even though we are in spaces, and I focus on payments. And so payments I know is like very, very localized. Payment rules and RBI messes up everything here, but there are enough people out there, Fed will mess it up in US, and there are enough local compliance, regulatory problems that you have to deal with, and how do you handle that through this? And vertical makes the problems more complex because then the expectation becomes that, hey, you know my space. So for example, something as simple as we have an appointment booking module. Typical appointment booking seems very simple, right? You come in and say, I want to get a haircut, I want to get a hair color. Typically, haircut takes 1 hour, hair color takes 1 hour. Fine, you take 2 hours, you get that. Wrong for this particular vertical, because it turns out that not only there is a sequence of do you do color first or do you do haircut first, there is also the fact that if you do haircut for an hour and hair color for an hour, actually the both done together is 1.5 hours. Now, a typical appointment booking won't understand. Google will not understand. Google Calendar will not understand. Right? So you have to be deep. And so when you start getting deeper, and some of our stories, and I'll say some of the examples of problems that we have faced, and a product manager, what kind of things they have to deal with, some of these become problematic because they themselves do not understand that space. Because, for example, somebody like me, I am not deep into beauty and wellness. 70% of our customers are women. So anyway, I'm out in that sense. I do not understand that part. Right? Many of our product managers are women. So in that sense, they understand that space. But then again, lots of my customers are in US. Most of my product managers are actually sitting in India. Right? So lots of these gaps happen. And some of the, for example, in payments, I'll give a payments example. Our assumption has always been that there is a front desk in any store, any retail store you go for any haircut or anything. There is a desk. Somebody puts a laptop or machine there. And then what we do is there is another screen. If you have gone to Decathlon, you would have seen that there is a screen facing the guest where they can see, oh, you have these 3 things that you did. Oh, now you have to charge $200 to me. Okay, I can tap and do something, give some feed. So there are screens facing them. There is a screen facing front desk. Now, we started getting all these complaints about, oh, you know what, customer gets stuck and something is wrong and we are not able to solve it. I said, you guys are just sitting there. What's the big deal? Just go look at it. Then when we asked some of the PMs that, hey, it's becoming a bigger problem. Okay, why don't you go visit some of these stores? And they went, and literally they went from here to US and then visited some of these places to get a haircut and color and everything else. And then we realized that the way these desks are set up, it's like almost this guy is sitting here and he's surrounded by this. Even though the guest is standing there, literally this much space, he can't go look at what is going on. And this was the table, the screen that was facing them. Something was happening. This guy has no clue what is happening. And he can't just go out and see them because then the time is of essence. So they're like, okay, what is going on? You solve some problem for me so that I can see it, and I can't see it this way. And we always thought you can walk away, but I can go. Something as simple as basic. And again, as I was telling earlier, it's experience. Now, my software was fine. There was no problem with the software. The PM could take the line that, oh, I built the product works. The screen does what it's supposed to do. It was stuck because the guy didn't know that he has to swipe the card. It was waiting. And you could talk through that. But then again, in this case, you have to still go and solve that problem. And of course, for us, the simple solution was that we said that hey, that should be on a swivel screen, because usually they used to have a physical fixed stuff. So we have a swivel and move it around. So that is one solution we put in. Other solution we put in was to say, hey, why don't you mirror that? So this we call as mirror. So this mirrors the invoice. We said have a reverse mirror, so that not only when you start seeing what they are seeing, you also start showing, oh, now the guest is on a place where he has to input the card. Now I tell this to this screen. And so that way, both of them are seeing each other. And then they can say, oh, you know what? Now you have to put it on the card. And so then they go do it. So you get that control sort of remote. At the same time, there's a swivel. So worst case scenario, you swivel it. Okay, ye ho raha hai, okay. So very simple stuff. Again, frankly, nothing to do with SaaS. Only part SaaS here is customers start expecting much more. A SaaS product manager, frankly, has to do way more than, I would say, a typical, I don't know what is a typical product manager, but if there was a typical product manager, a SaaS product manager will have to do way more. Again, in our case, there are other kinds of things that come into play. For example, again, since any ERP system will collect huge amount of data, right? Because the whole all the employees, everybody just spends all their waking office time through our software. A huge amount of data. And so therefore, there will be a situation where PM will go and talk to the customer about some feature. And they will say, but you should know, but I'm using it. So customer is smart, even though these are all not tech savvy people, they hate technology. But they understand cloud, they understand that part, that hey, you should know this data. And the PM was like, yeah, I can do it. And again, he was lousy in that sense. I mean, again, we didn't know. I mean, it's not like that person, but we didn't know that, yes, we have all this data, so we can actually figure out that you did this inventory module, you did this mess up because of which the product was not available on the front desk, because of which when you swiped it and you charged it, but the actual product was not there on the shelf because something messed up. It went through my software, but it didn't really register to the PM that, okay, I'm a payments PM. But then in the other modules, other things are happening. There is a huge amount of data sitting in my system. I could use that data, create dashboard, do insights of all kinds, and I can actually know more about the business than the person themselves. And therefore, I don't have to talk to my customer all the time. And so for us, again, that was a shift. It was early time, and then it was a shift that do not assume that you are a product manager of this module. So customer will give you this leeway. Oh, you will only know this. No, the whole thing, again, that for them, everything is, you go to a browser, you open the screen, everything is one click away. For them, this whole thing is one product. And so you cannot slice yourself, so you need to know enough. That becomes trouble, but it's fulfilling, it's rewarding, because then it gives you much more exposure to lots of things. Anyway, I can keep talking about many of these things, but I think important thing, one part is we are vertical SaaS. So Vivek, if you could sort of talk through some of the horizontal and vertical, that aspect, I think that will be useful.
Sure. Thank you, Mrityunjay. No, I think, see, vertical SaaS versus horizontal SaaS, what it means is you have heard terms like CRM or ERP or HRMS, which is my current company, right? So what happens is these processes are there across the board, right? For example, whether or not you are an airline, or let us say you build vacuum cleaners, you still need to have a ticketing process. Somebody calls in, a ticket has to be raised. So ServiceNow, for example, will have solutions. So that's like a horizontal system. Salesforce, if you are selling generators or cars, or your Airbus, you're selling planes, you still need to have the concept of pipeline. A plane costs so much. This is how I quote the cost of a plane. This is the opportunity. The opportunity moves to 20%, 40%, right? I mean, if you're familiar with the whole CRM life cycle. Now, what that is typically horizontal, right? It pretty much all these processes are so general. Everywhere you'll have HR, for example, right? Everywhere we need to pay our employees, so payroll is required, right? Everywhere we need to do goal setting. So that is what is typically horizontal, right? So what Nityanjay talked about was more vertical because it applies to one specific industry, right? And it's always an interesting thing because companies tend to specialize this way or that way. And as they sort of move forward, I think horizontal companies also try to bring out vertical solutions. So, for example, at Salesforce, there was an industry division, right? And the industry division slowly started bringing out scenarios for consumer and packaged goods. How do you do retail execution, which is basically a product inspection, like Procter and Gamble would go to, say, Ratnadeep and check and see if your surf or whatever, or product is there in the right place, the right time, right? Similarly, there were other products in sort of healthcare and other domains. So the whole idea of horizontal is where it applies to all industries, and vertical is where it applies to certain specific industries. But horizontal companies tend to monitor, going back to the whole monetization angle, right? We talked about making money, right, with the product. So there, you tend to get a premium if you have a verticalized horizontal solution. By that I mean, like for example, if I go into, let us say, a bank, right, and I have a solution that is very CRM, but it is tuned to the bank. It understands the core components of bank. It understands what a bank account is. It understands what a bank manager is. It understands that ecosystem. then you can charge X for the horizontal and Y for the vertical. So it becomes X plus Y. So that is another way in which we as product managers tend to challenge the addressable market. I spoke about the total addressable market, right, which is in the previous answer. So X plus Y tends to enhance, we push the limits, but it's a hard thing to do. I mean, it's not something you can do from day one, right? Because you have to get both these things right for anybody to even pay you X plus Y. If you try to do both of them very early, they'll pay you zero, which is the worst kind of situation you have to be in. So therefore, that's the nuance between vertical and horizontal, if that makes sense.
Add one comment to it. So Zenoti, in that sense, was blessed because Sudhir, the founder, he was in some total, and then he retired. He had enough money. He said, "Okay, I'll not work," and then he started a spa chain. And so he ran a spa chain. 3-4 spa latitudes was there in Hyderabad that time. 3-4 of them. And so he was running it, and then he realized, hey, I don't have a good software. Then he, of course, he was a software guy. He called other guys in some total. Said, hey, why don't you build a software for me? And so it started out, to your point, contrary to your point, it started out as a vertical because they had absolutely no desire to do anything else. The goal was, how do I get a software which can run latitudes chain of spa well? And they built it. In fact, they took a year and a half just to build it well enough for those 4-5 centers to do it. And when they have it, then they realize, damn, this is better than all the other software that are out there. So let me go try it out with others. And then that's how it started out. And I can tell you the way we have priced in US, we are, I think, 4 or 5 times more expensive than the nearest competitor that we have. So the power of vertical, as you were saying, power of vertical is you can demand a premium. So you have to get there and you have to get the product well. In our case, since we started that way, we were already vertical and everything was going on. But we can actually demand a huge premium. Of course, we have to stand behind it and do the product well and continue to do that. But in general, you can demand a premium if you're vertical. But horizontal gives you a huge space. For us, the whole space will be how many beauty salons, how many spas, how many fitness centers are there, right? It is still constrained. For a horizontal ERP is like the sky's the limit. It's a huge segment. It's like you choose, do you go deep or do you stay horizontal? So both of them have their own value.
Yeah, the beauty and wellness vertical. I would have been a super flop product manager. So I belong to that subsegment of men who do not understand coloring and cutting hair. So yeah, I think some of this jokes apart, each one of the segments throw up a lot of nuances in each of these. Thanks for your stories. Hearing what you say, the role of product manager seems to be a very complex role, very scary role. And just want to understand what are the attributes you look at and how do you measure the performance of a product manager in such a complex environment? Or is it really as scary as I think at this moment?
No, I think it's all about thinking in the right framework and measuring, right? I think Nityanjay very beautifully pointed out earlier that there is a certain degree of engineering methodology you have to bring, regardless, because we are in a field of engineering in the end, right? So you have to think about metrics. So there are multiple dimensions in which at least I have an opinion on how you want to measure, right? So first thing is at the very top, your product needs to make some money, right? So for example, let us say you need to have a target saying that, my recruitment model needs to make so much money, right? How it will make, how do you want to price, how many customers do you want to go after, the Middle East versus Europe versus North America. These are calls you have to take. But that would be one clear metric where you can sort of build the right product that can sell, right? That would be one metric that you would like to measure yourself on. So then after that, we also look at what is the adoption, right? So that means that, am I getting enough people? Say, first of all, you want to check and see if your customer is going live, right? After they have purchased by paying you good money, are they going live? And after they go live, does the persona, which is again, go back to Revati, right? Our HR BP, is she coming back to the respective pages that we have built? Is she utilizing the journeys Like, is she going from page 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 in the manner in which you want her to go? And then also there's a net promoter score, which is essentially NPS. We try to measure and ask her, is she able to sort of, is she satisfied, right? So you have to do well. So there is a revenue metric, which is number one. Then there is an adoption / customer success metric, which is the second framework. Then the third thing is predominantly more on the operational side, right? So for any system or engineering process to work, you as a PM have to do your job, right? You have to make sure that if there is a 2-week sprint, you have written the right kind of stories with the right kind of level of detail. You have done the due diligence on prioritizing the backlog, right? So that your team is understanding. You have sat with your engineering team, your design team, you explained what the story is going to be, right? So that is all very operational. You have to be ahead of schedule there, right? So that we don't run into a situation where during the building people are just asking questions that are very fundamental. As a PM, you should avoid that. So we measure that as well, which is essentially how ahead of the engineering train you are, right? And how you can sort of groom well in advance and well in time, and how you can prioritize. And a lot of the decisions as a PM you have to also take around, go live, right? So like somebody told me, I think one of my mentors mentioned, that shipping is also a feature. So if you are continuously delaying a feature because you want to like make it ultra perfect, then that is also something that we want it to be live. We want customers to use it. You have to take hard calls, right? You have to prioritize maybe some bugs. You'll have to say that we'll do it in a patch and things like that. So those are like the few areas. So revenue, adoption, operational capabilities, and all of that, and also figuring out the final thing I would say is ensuring that you have the right amount of the right team, right? So ensuring that you have hired the right PMs, or you hired the right engineering managers, ensuring that you have the right kind of setup and org. Those would be like the 3 or 4 areas I would think would make sense.
What are that? Because we are discussing about some of the scenarios we come across where people say, I don't no longer want to be technical, so I'll become a product manager. Or someone, I'm technical, but I think I'm ready for product management. So what are the attributes you look at when someone who needs to become a product manager or ready to become a product?
Yeah, so I think overall, I definitely believe that you need to have what is called as like a design thinking, or a fundamental thinking. Nityanjay very beautifully explained that his software runs in 59 countries in multiple languages, and if somebody makes a feature change, it applies to all the customers. Now, it may seem very simple to you that that is happening, but there is an enormous amount of complexity that goes in standardizing, right? So, what I place as very strong emphasis in terms of just any kind of interview parlance is to have that fundamental thinking. How you can generalize and bring out an abstract pattern that fits, all of these ecosystems. That would be like a very specific question. So if somebody says, I'm going to optimize for customer A, then usually that's a red flag, because if you're optimizing only for customer A without thinking about all the other customers, then that goes against the principle of building a generic solution. So that would be one common construct. Also understanding and empathizing with each constituent that is there in the ecosystem. So by that I mean, like, you have to obviously understand what your customer is, who your customer is. You have to, like, going back to Revati, right? She's front and center. Whatever feature you're building, you have to ask yourself, is it going to improve her life, right? So that is obvious. You're a PM, so you have to understand your customer. But you have to also understand your engineering manager, your design partner really well. Are you giving your design partner enough time for her to think the right kind of, are you explaining the user case well enough? That's very important. Are you understanding the engineering manager constraints, right? Are you able to have a conversation with the engineering manager stating that he or she is now explaining that they're going to do it in so much time, and this is the level of technical detail they're going to, like, change this Java class or something like that, or this Node.js entity, and this is going to take so much time. Are you able to sort of have a conversation at that level with them, so that they can understand that you can understand their point and they can understand yours? So having that empathy with all the constituents, right from the customer, is sort of another thing. And of course, like Nityanjay explained, understanding the business, right? What is happening tomorrow? It may be as obvious as, the Fed has increased rates. So therefore, there is a certain impact because of which the buying behavior of enterprise is going to change, right? So in my case, if an enterprise has X dollars to spend, would that X dollars go to like a CRM versus an HRMS, right? So trying to have an understanding of that and trying to build in features that are more and more critical so that you can take that share of the budget. Also having an understanding of the macro picture is also very important in my view. So I think to summarize, I think understanding just the generic thinking of how you can build a sort of an abstract pattern, empathizing with all the constituents who you work with, and then also just understanding the macro market, how it impacts and what are the trends. Those three things at a minimum would be important as we sort of have this conversation.
Thanks. So he talked about people and the performance expectations from people. And as you're speaking, I see that as a person, a product manager has many interaction points. You talked about engineering managers, the sales, marketing, the CEOs, the customers. There are multiple interaction points. So to make all of this work for a product manager, there needs to be some underlying method in the whole madness. So what kind of process systems one need to put in place? What you have put in place that makes life relatively, I'm not telling it's an easy life, but relatively easy?
Yeah, that's a hard question, because frankly, we haven't put anything in place. We are relying on people to be good product managers, because it is hard to put structure in place where you can say, okay, if you follow it, life will be good, and in this scenario, you will perform better. Having said that, I think what we have tried to do, and whenever I talk to product managers, I try to tell them is there are certain, and some of it is due to the fact that we are in a SaaS ecosystem. It may not have been there for others, but as I was saying earlier, it has to be experience that people have to focus on. And typically, when we hire a product manager, when they come in, they sort of come in as a problem solver, because lots of people out there think that, okay, only thing that they need is, oh, give me a problem, I'll solve it. I'll do this, do this, do this. Which, at least what I have found, is required. It is there, but then it's a very small part of the overall ecosystem. You need to first understand the customer. So for us, for example, we have this whole set of things that you have to do as part of onboarding, as part of sales support, spending time to understand how customers are using the product. And so just immerse yourself as much as you can. Again, you will not get too much time, but whatever time you have, immerse yourself in understanding that ecosystem, who this person is. As we talked about persona, and I think that's a great point. If there's one point that you carry away from you, please make sure that you always understand the persona that you are working for. It's very easy. Again, all of us are smart. It's very easy for us to try to abstract out things and say, this will work with all of these guys. And what it ends up happening is doesn't work perfectly for even one single person in your target segment. And what is better is, at least it works perfectly well for 10 people. It's a better product, and it works little bit for everybody, but perfectly for nobody. The persona actually helps in this. For example, for us, we have a persona called Ambitious Andy. Now, Ambitious Andy is a salon owner. Again, as you can see, name also say ambitious. So there's a growth. We have other guys also in the persona. But in this case, for example, the persona will be, for you, is this the person who wants to grow? He has a single center that they have, but they have this aspiration to grow the business in that center, and they want to get more centers. That's the kind of a person. That's why there will be some customers who are like that, right? So now the PM has to understand, first of all, what is behind this. For example, they have to understand demographic of this person. Who are these people? In our space, most of these ambitious Andes are the people who were extremely good at their craft, and they had a loyal customer base around them. They were working with some brand or something. And then they realized that, you know what, this whole set of people is actually coming to the center because I am there. And so they realize, oh, I can actually go ahead and start my own business. This is how people start business. So ambitious Andy, as you can already see, ambitious Andy is the person who is a master craftsman, which also means that he or she is high in demand. I mean, I met one of these ambitious Andys, and of course, it was hard to find the time because the time is very, very valuable. San Francisco Center, this person, there's a queue of like 1.5 months to get their hair done by this person. Usual cut pricing there, I think, was $90. This person charges $250, one haircut. And there was this huge queue, and you can't get time with this person. Right? So now imagine, my software should not take any minute away from this person, because every minute of this person is like $2. You don't want this guy to be doing, oh, inventory report, I will look at it, then figure out, oh, product is not there, and therefore I have to order. What the hell? This guy is not going to take your product. So the PM has to understand that. Now, how do you understand that? They have to first of all appreciate the fact, and that's where we actually struggle, because people sitting here cannot imagine that $250 haircut can be in demand. Because $250 is like people convert into rupees and then they say, okay, fine. Okay. So they don't understand the concept. So one is to make sure to travel and other kinds of things that we do, but make sure that PMs have to understand all of these, their customer, their ecosystem, their persona. Company will do whatever it is, but individual has to do that. And we spent quite some time. Of course, COVID messed up lots of things because we couldn't travel, but we generally try to do that. That's one aspect of sort of getting them prepared for the ecosystem that we have. But then the other aspect that has to come in, which has to come in from the individual, that they have to realize, okay, we are in SaaS world. For example, in SaaS world, you may take 1 million to build a software piece. You are going to charge this guy $300 a month. How do you justify spending $1 million and then keep counting beans to get to that $1 million at some point in time? So this person has to be the one figuring out, okay, can I spend $100,000 and get something out there and start getting maybe $150? That may be better. Because for all you know, you build $1 million product, it goes out, 3 months ke baad, it figures out, nobody uses it. On. Right? So it's important to factor in the fact that you are not going to be paid for what you are building. And this PM has to understand this fact. And this takes time. This takes sort of, we have to break it into their head. This is not a regular product development cycle that you may have read in a book or in a course or whatever, that, okay, you will do a speccing, you will do all this, but then in a different way. Right? You will do speccing, you will do design, you will do a modeling, you will do lots of these things, but then you have to be very aware of the money that is going in to build a product and what is your time to value. Right? When do you get that money? How much time does it take to get that money? And can you do smaller iterations? For example, SaaS gives you this advantage, right? If the customer is there, you can change your product, and next day the customer starts using it and gets mad at you if the product is not good. So it's good. You get the feedback immediately, so you can try it out and say, you know what, customer will take it, or customer will not take it, without spending that 1 million. Maybe you spend $10,000. So having that habit, again, that is where we try to get our PMs to go through this cycle, understand this, read some case studies. We have lots of these sessions where we do, okay, understand the customers. Customer facing groups do that. CSM, we have customer success managers who will do these sessions, trying to get people to understand these customers. But overall, I think if somebody comes into my company as a, let's say, product manager who wants to be a good product manager in this ecosystem, we expect them to be people who can immerse themselves in a space very well, very quickly, be able to design a product which can design keeping price and cost and value in mind. Because many times we just design software as software. But here, SaaS softwares are softwares where price is a very important factor. How much money you are spending to build it is a very important factor. That's a non-functional requirement. People don't put cost as a requirement, but in a SaaS, cost is a requirement. My AWS cost starts shooting up every month. This product is not going anywhere. So it becomes important. So again, I don't know if I answered your question in any good way, but I think few things that become more unique to SaaS. But again, many of these things are just a process that you have to continue to go through it. And some of these things, if you don't pick, you'll fail. As simple as that. If you try to be a regular product manager, you may fail in our company or any other SaaS company.
So in this room, we have a lot of early stage startups, and most of them are engineers, right? Most of them are engineers who are and working with their co-founders who are engineers and in the journey of in the startup journey, you come across scenarios where in an evolutionary way you're building the product, and one fine morning there is one huge requirement change. There's a requirement where you have to completely redo a functionality or completely rebuild that software. So that creates a lot of challenges within the company, especially early stage. Have you gone through those? You must have gone through those scenarios where these sudden requirement changes have come and you have to revamp certain things. How do you go about managing the team in the first place? And how do you go about building such rapidly changing major requirements?
No, I think that is sort of the nature of the beast. I think it is going to happen because, like I said, the market is also changing. It like, for example, nobody would have known, like maybe 3 years ago, that we would be hit with like such an enormous pandemic, right? So, of course, overnight now, especially in my Darwinbox sort of software, becomes very important that now customers have to be able to do their entire work using, remote. They'll not be interacting anymore. So this becomes definitely a very important thing. So you have to be very agile, and you have to be able to think differently. Sometimes what happens is, in the case of COVID, everybody agreed that it's a big problem. So we all were together. But it needs to be done because you are of the opinion that it's a wonderful thing. But you have to convince, right? So convincing can happen in multiple ways. You try to say that there is money to be made, right? So you try to do just a basic business case and say this money has to be made. Or B, you basically don't build the whole thing, but you build a working prototype, run it with a few customers, and say, there is enormous interest in this. When you this is like an added proof to. But the point ultimately is you try to understand each and every person in the stakeholders' perspective and try to convince them of changes, right? And how you want to sort of influence. As PMs, a lot of people will look at you and they would want you to set direction, right? So your voice will have a lot of credibility, and they'll have a lot of authority. So all of that would apply. So I think to answer your question, I would say there are two kinds of scenarios. One is when everybody agrees, like a COVID-like scenario, and when somebody doesn't agree, then you try to build a business case, build a POC or two, show some traction in the market, get some few customers. Once people see the little bit of a dynamic working, the abstract becomes concrete, right? And when the concreteness comes in, then you will get a lot more support. Then you will find that you'll get more funding, and you will start doing your own thing. So I think those are the few ways I would say we can.
So we'll open the floor for the audience here and audience online. Right? Yeah. So we can take questions from both online and offline. Yeah, go ahead.
You mean compare as in performance of the company? So yes, in SaaS world, there are very well-defined metrics that people go for. If it is a public company, then you may get those information. In a private, you may not get to know those numbers. So again, if you have access to the founder, and founder will give you the numbers. So in a SaaS, typically, as I said, it's a mostly subscription business, right? So of course, the most important measure is if they are revenue bearing, if they're actually making money. So what is that recurring money that is coming in? Right? It could be monthly, yearly, whichever way they are measuring. What is that recurring money? Now, to be clear, startups typically will start in a way, even if they're a SaaS startup, they may have some of these things going on the side with the customers where they will do one-off work like some implementation or something, and they'll get $2,000, $5,000, $10,000. That is not recurring. It will come every time. And that's the beauty of SaaS versus non-SaaS, that once you have a customer, there is a recurring stream that is coming in that continues. You don't have to keep selling them. You just have to keep them happy enough, right? So that's one measure. Right? Then there are other measures depending on what kind of product is there. There may be measures of, okay, you have sold it today. When can they go live? You mentioned the fact that, okay, you want to, PM should get them live quickly, but that measure is an important measure. sold it. Now you want to get them live, because only when they are live, they'll start paying you that money. Right? So that, and again, that depends on multiple factors. We, for example, are an ERP system. So for us, it takes lots of time because we have to understand the business process. Then we have to map it. Then they will not agree to it. Then there will be changes to their front desk, and then they have to train everybody. All kinds of things will happen, and we try to expedite it. But in general, that will be a measure, and that measure you will try to see, okay, it's small, it's good. If it is big, it is not good, of course. Then you look at the component of the cost, right? Okay, what is the cost? Typically, if you are on cloud, for example, there's a cloud cost. You are on AWS, there is a cost to AWS, and as you scale, that cost will go up. So that component, I think these three numbers, again, there are tons of numbers you can go look up. But if you look at these three numbers, especially in a startup, I think you will be in a good shape to understand, okay, are they doing well? Are they not doing well? If you want to add.
No, I think that makes sense. So basically, what Nityanjay was saying is more around what is called as churn. So in SaaS, you should always look at the number of people who are renewing. So if you have 100 customers, ideally 100 people should renew, right? That is number one. But at least 95 people should renew, right? That's important. The second thing I would also add is what is called as upsell. So as a PM, you should always have, so there are technical terms. There's something called SKUs, which is called stock keeping unit. So that means that when you price a particular piece of software, you're selling them, say, these 10 features, right? But as a PM, you should also have 5 additional features that can be sold. These additional 5 will be like a upsell. So you have to see how much are they being upselling, right? That would be another element that I think we should add. But overall, I think very simply, I mean, are they making money from the business? Is it sort of venture funded and only is sort of burning? So understanding those nuances also help, because typically, at least in SaaS, in my view, you should be profitable. Your engineering shouldn't be more than the revenue you're making at a bare minimum. In consumer space, it becomes very different because your customer acquisition is like a very big deal, and there's a lot of marketing, etc., that you have to do. But here you should try to make the profitability pretty quickly, and you should just look at that as well. So I mean, those are a few things: churn, upsell, and in addition to what Mrityunjay explained. No, I think, see, in my view, both are going to be there. I think we are going to see more and more companies innovating in all these spaces, right? So I think both areas. It's just a question of as a founder or as a PM, what are you going to attack, right? Some people, like Nityanjay explained, want to go wide, and therefore they go horizontal because the market is so big. You pretty much can knock any door and you can sell the software. Whereas others go vertical because you believe that your product can command a premium because you have depth, right? So I think my sense is both would be there, and there's like an enormous amount of opportunity in all of these spaces.
I'll add to that because of my bias of vertical, because we have seen vertical. I strongly, and there was a time where horizontal, and I look at the VC side. There was a time when horizontals were funded a whole lot. All kinds of horizontal products were there. Okay, you can do this. This can be done by everybody. You put it out there. Lots of people can take it. Numbers can very quickly go up, and VCs will fund you. Right? Then vertical SaaS came actually around the time when Zenoti was coming through. That time VCs started realizing that, hey, you know what? There are actually acute problems in lots of these vertical areas, which only people who are in that space will know. And so therefore, the horizontals don't solve it too well. What used to happen even today, when we go to these large brands, we'll go to large brand like there's a European Wax Center, for example, the customer 900 centers. Right? When we go to these brands, they would be using like 5 or 6 different software. They are all horizontal, some to manage their photos, some to manage their costs, some to manage their marketing, some to manage their inventory, but they will not work well with each other. And these are not tech people, remember, right? These are vertical guys, are not tech guys, they're craftsmen. The ambitious Andys will slowly become not ambitious Andy, but still they're all craftsmen people, right? So they don't understand software. So then it becomes very hard for them to put it together. So vertical became important in last 10, 15 years. And if you look at the valuation and the VC funding, verticals have been getting that. And personally, I have looked at now many verticals because we have been looking at should we go into another vertical? We have been saying, no, it's too hard, right? Because to be really good and market leader in a vertical, it does take 10, 15 years, like the way we have been spending, and we still are scratching the surface. We still have more to go. But there are lots of these verticals you will look around which require these kind of solution, and there is an opportunity, huge opportunity to become a market leader, and you will demand premium, and you can be global, and you can build, because the beauty of SaaS is you can be global and they can do all. So there is lots of opportunities vertical.
I could relate everything what you're speaking on practical standpoint because I am part of a program and I work with stakeholders, product managers are one of those. My question to you is, since I work with a big enterprise, right? So how does a product manager role, and based on your experiences, like different in a large enterprise versus a startup? Because I see when we talk about the large enterprises, there are that are and for every scrum teams we have a product owner and they have to cut across these things. Sometimes there's a lot of decision making, a lot of feature development, and right? Compared to the large enterprise versus startup experiences that you guys have, right? Where do you see like it's very hard to compare, I know, but some insights, based on that, where does the product managers their role differs from big enterprise versus to a startup, because they may be doing a lot of things. So some insights on that will be very helpful.
Large organizations, how large organizations do stuff. But I think one key difference will be, for example, when if I look at my journey with Zenoti, for example, we started when I joined. It was 5 years into the journey, and I think I was like 150th employee or around that number. Right now we are about 1,000. So we have been growing both in terms of revenue, in terms of lots of footprints, as well as, of course, in terms of people. So I see this growth path. Of course, I saw Microsoft and ran away multiple times, as I said. But so I have that baseline, even though that's not strictly SaaS or anything, but I think some of these problems are independent of SaaS. I think one of the things is, when we say that the product manager anywhere is owning, in a startup, that is very, very true. It literally is owning, because you don't get to say, oh, I'm stuck here, therefore I can't do it, this guy. You are the one, go do it. There's nobody anyway in startup. You will not have a legal guy, you will not have a compliance guy, you will not have a guy who will do regulations, you will not have a guy who will do finance and say, financial model, I'll give it to you. Nobody. You are doing everything. If it is not software engineering, which somebody is there to do that engineering, other than that, everything pretty much you have. So you're really owning in that sense, because you can't say there's somebody else who is doing stuff. As companies grow, you start specializing for good reasons. So enterprise and large enterprises, if you look at it, even we are now getting into that trouble, because we are sort of becoming bigger, where we started specializing. Our decision making starts becoming slower. So there are people who have to come in for all the right reasons. So now we have, for example, legal team. Now I have to go through them, try to get them to understand what I'm saying, and then it takes its own time. Right? Similarly, I'll go somewhere else. And so what happens, and many companies do that, Microsoft has done it. When I was in Microsoft, they sliced the whole product manager notion into program manager, product planner, product manager. There was one more role. So 3 or 4 roles were created just around this, not even marketing, it is just purely product side. Because there will always be this tussle of, okay, who will do what, when do they do, what do they do? So, okay, product planner will just get inputs from customer and put it on the table. Product manager will just do marketing and launch and that part of it. Program manager will take all these things which are put on the table and then take it forward. So if you look at it that way, then product manager as a word starts disappearing, and these specializations start coming in. And so therefore this notion of, okay, I own the product starts melting away. It doesn't really happen that way. Now, as an individual, if you are going through this journey, sometimes it can be very disconcerting. And maybe that's why I keep running away. That you feel like, hey, you're the owner. And then suddenly you are no longer the owner, because there are 5 more people who are doing stuff, and you feel like, okay, I'm doing one slice. Am I a product manager in the way that I thought I will be product manager? Right? But of course, enterprise has the advantage that you get the value. I mean, today, for example, we are building some of the products which are deep compliance problems, early wage access, and some of those kind of things in US. So I do need that expertise on that side. Enterprise does provide me that. If I was a startup, I couldn't even build a product for that. now I can actually think of building a product. So I get the value. So I have to figure out how do I stay slow, give some ownership to people, but still get my product out there because the impact of the product could be much higher. So I'm trading off my ownership with the impact that I can produce. And at least that's my experience.
No, I think very aptly put. I think I the most recently worked at Salesforce, which is like a large organization. So there are a couple of different things. I think there are both good and bad things in both, in my view. Basically, what happens is in larger organizations, there's a very meticulous process ironed out. It's not like the Wild West, right? So, for example, at Salesforce, we're very clear that on the 17th of February, on the 30th of June, and on the 17th of October, we'll have a production release, right? It was ironed out, and therefore you would back calculate from that, and therefore you would have what is called as a release freeze or a feature freeze. So the planning was meticulous, and you as a PM had to manage your backlog and fit it into each release so that you can hit to the customer. So that is good, right? But what it also becomes is sometimes a feature that you want to release today, it will actually hit the customer like 6 months down the line or so on. So there is a certain time that you sort of have to. It cannot be done like immediately, right? And what also happens is when the product becomes complex, like Nityanjay was explaining, right? Salesforce is infinitely more complex than Zenoti because it has spent so much more time. So there are like so many layers, right? So you have like a platform layer, and then you have like an app layer, then you have like a database layer and a schema layer. So if for example, I have to build a feature that has like a dependency on the platform layer, now I have to establish a meeting with that person, and that person, I'll have to convince him or her about that feature. Then he or she has to then decide whether they want to do it, and if they do it, only then I can use it. Right. So therefore, there is a release. So the 6 months that I wanted to release earlier has now become 12 months. So 6 months, I'm just waiting for them to release the feature, and then after that, I would. So I think the good I would say is this process meticulous. You have people who will help you out. So there are like people like Mrityunjay was explaining for legal, marketing, compliance. You have like all the specialists, and therefore you can focus on your work and but in a startup, what happens is you have to do all of that yourself. There have been instances in Darwinbox where we have thought of feature on Monday, and Monday night the feature is live, right? So that sort of thing Salesforce would have done in 1999, right? But it cannot do it in 2022. That's just the nature of the beast. And whereas in Darwinbox in 2022 we can do it, right? And just because we had so that's the sort of the ownership. And like I said, one final thing I would say is the sheer beauty of working in a startup is that there is just so many different things you do in one day, right? So for example, 9 o'clock would be like a meeting with Gartner. 10 a.m. would be like a deep design with your engineering head, where you go and understand like data models, analytics, AI, ML algorithms, Then 11, you'll be talking to a customer. 12 would be a prospect. And by the time you go to like 1 o'clock, having like a design discussion. So I'm just saying, in what would take many days of different kind of meetings, so maybe you'll never be able to do it there. Here you're doing it in 4 or 5 hours, which I find very inspiring and motivating, and that is the beauty of working in startup. Yeah.
Thank you for the enlightening discussion. Are there any thumb rules from your experience for pricing a product or a feature? From your own experience, what kind of thumb rules do you follow to price it?
This is sort of a $1 million question, literally, no pun intended. But Hello? Okay. So as a result, you charge the customer like a double. So that is one way. But I think value sometimes is far more than double, because now if you are saving the customer $1 million in their day-to-day business, it may be fair for you to charge like $200,000 or $300,000, right? So what you then do is you basically try and understand how much money they are saving, right? And then you try to eat a part of it essentially, or you look at competition, what competition is pricing, right? And you may also look at not direct competitors, you may look at like ancillary fields, right? And you want to see how much they are charging, right? So there is a bunch of science and that you can do modeling of the sort. I mean, ultimately, it's also a little bit of an art that you sort of gain, you sort of add a little bit of premium because you believe that there are certain features that you can sell because it's a much more easier user experience or what have you. So that is also a concept. So ultimately, pricing is a combination of all of these things. And my view is in our line of business, value-based selling is very important, and having very deep margins is good. I mean, we shouldn't look at it as a cost plus. At least that's my view, because whatever features we are building are pretty much game changing, and which are improving efficiencies of enterprises in pretty remarkable ways. So I think value-based pricing is what I would sort of encourage. And what think you?
Yeah, I'll add to that. As I mentioned, like we have been pricing our product like 5 times more than nearest competitor. The reason is because we feel, and we have spent lots of time in understanding the value that we bring to the table. For example, lots of our competitors are not even cloud providers, because the space you always needed software. So people had software, desktop software, and all kinds of software. So we feel we are adding much more value by having a consolidated view of the data, the analytics, and all of those kind of things. And we have priced it. Good thing about SaaS is, I feel, you can get the feedback very quickly, right? Because there is no time. And if somebody wants to try out, they can literally go to a web and try it out, right? I can give demo data and then show them, and they can start looking at their own stuff. And so if they really feel that, hey, this is not the value that I'm getting and I'm paying you this much, they'll tell you, or you will get to know that adoption will start going down. Some of your metrics will start dropping. And we have seen in some cases that we have charged higher, and then people are not using it and they get upset and cranky. Customer success team starts saying, hey, these guys keep bringing up this kind of thing. Then I know that, hey, I really priced it much higher. I thought this value will be there. They're not realizing that value. So PM gets in and tries to tweak it. But SaaS does allow you to sort of figure it out. But I would always recommend value based. The problem is if you are a startup, and depending on what your market can bear and whatever your product is, where you may not be able to do that. So you still have to find your way. But I think product should get to that point. And if we build the product well by understanding the customer needs very well, I think we should get there, and we should try to get there. And at least we have done that for the last 10, 11 years. We have been continuing to do that.
Yeah, and on a lighter note, the best of the breed pricing guys are in Reliance. And if you want to validate your pricing model, Reliance is the last customer, not first customer. If at all it's in your target, you will forget your pricing model. So you'll undersell the rest of the group.
So one question from online is, as a product manager, where do you consume information from? Do you read books or do you read blogs? Or I mean, where do you upskill yourself from the world?
I mean, it's a little bit of a cliche, but you learn every minute. I think there's a little bit of a story there. So I think in my own personal experience, Mrityunjay may have his own sort of methodology, but I try to sort of learn a lot from customers, right? I think they are the best people. Yesterday I met a very good customer, and he taught me so many things that I did not anticipate, right? I mean, because there were so many different scenarios he was challenging us on. So definitely keeping that in mind is very, very important. Learning from customers is, I think, in my view, number one. Of course, there are, industry analysts, especially in HRMS. There's like a guy called Josh Presin. If you follow him, you basically, he writes very eloquently. and very well about the English Gartner and other areas. And of course, data also teaches you quite a bit. So you can look at adoption patterns and of course, just read up more. You have conversations with peers, and even having design conversations with your own colleagues is a pretty significant learning experience. So I think, I mean, my view is, keep all channels open and try to learn as much as you can from any possible way. That's what.
Yeah, this is a topic I'm doing my research and learning. So this is a topic I could keep talking for hours, but I have a slightly different point of view. I think learning has to be goal directed, because as a PM, you get exposed to so many different things that if you start literally learning every single thing that comes your way, you will not have time. So you have to be very, very precise about, okay, what do you want to learn, and then go about it. And for example, that's where if you feel that, okay, I don't understand the domain well enough, then you'll figure out, okay, now I have to go to the domain and learn. Now, different areas will require different kinds of ways of learning. For example, in some cases, you can learn from customers. In some cases, you will have to go read the books. In some cases, for example, in my space, payments is the space where lots of regulations are there. So what you learn is you go read the specs. Fed will have written some like 30 pages of NACHA specification. Go read it. It's very dull, very boring, but unless you read that, you cannot learn. And as much as possible, try to go to the source. In this world of fake news, you will read all kinds of things, and it may be somebody writes a blog, and I know Josh Bersin, some total also, and then he writes well, and that I'm not saying to him, but in general, you'll find all kinds of crap out there. So be very careful. At least as a PM, we should be very discerning. Go to the primary source as much as possible, but then be very, very focused on what you want to learn at what point in time. You need to be extremely good at learning, but then be very focused. Otherwise, you may just be learning and not be useful to the company.
Got it. So before we move on to the next question, so as we are at the right point about learning about product management, I just want to introduce our MTech in product management and design. So basically, IIIT has come up with an initiative recently last year in partnership with MIT and designed a 2 years program. So 2 years program is open for industry leaders, startups, and students from GATE. So there are 2 semesters of classes and 2 semesters of product development project. So during this 2 years, you will be learning the fundamentals of product management and design, and as well as you'll also be building a product which can you eventually convert into a startup. So applications are open now for industry and startups. So I encourage all of you to check out the website, or you can just scan the QR code here and apply. And there's also a scholarship that can be offered, and you also have a flexibility to do this at a part time. Like most of the courses are like two sessions in a week, and you could do this pursuing your job and do this degree course. Master's course from IIIT. I just want to quickly show you what are the courses that we have over these 2 years, and then move on to next questions. So the first semester, you'll be going through design thinking, user research methods, business fundamentals, and product development. You'll be kickstarting your product development project. So the whole point is like, IIIT Hyderabad being a technology institution, like technology plays a key role in product design and management, and it's rightly clubbed with business fundamentals through this course. And it's a very curated course that the professors have designed. The second semester, you'll be going through a product design course. There are 2 courses on product design and a course on technology product entrepreneurship. How do you convert that products into actual businesses, and how do you translate that ideas of yours? And you'll also have workshop on using Maker Lab or Maker Lab to build hardware products directly. And the next 2 semesters would be a open elective that you can choose. So our focus is all on ICT products, and if you can also choose electives on IoT or wearable computing. So we have designing those courses on the emerging technology areas, and you'll be doing your product development over the next 2 semesters. There's been a huge response for this course, since it's one of the kind initiative that IIIT has taken. So I encourage all of you to check out this course because we have lots of guest speakers. So in fact, this session this we are doing is part of that program. So you have lots of insights to real time, real life experiences and experienced product managers as professors. So I request all of you to scan that code and check like if you want to do, or if you can refer your friend who wants to do a MTech or a master's degree in product management. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
As part of this course, if you have a product idea or if your company's idea you want to realize, so you can take that idea and realize it through the course. You're allowed to do that. Or there might be classmates who might be working on their ideas, then you can work along with them and build a real product as part of this coursework. And once you're done, if you really want to scale that into a startup, there are multiple programs there to seed your to do a startup seeding. So all of this will get tied together through the course and post the course. Okay, I think you had a question. We'll take your question.
I didn't get the answer. Sorry, question. Different places. So, okay, so one aspect is different place, depending on the product that you have. One is different places have different sensibilities to the product. Unfortunately, for example, if you look at India and if you launch the product, the sensibility around UX and some of those may be slightly lower. You go to US and try to launch a product, they'll be much higher. The expectation is much higher, primarily because there are other products which will be of a certain kind, right? So there is a nuance of what kind of product will work. And therefore, product manager, if you are in a certain place, you have to do that. You have to understand that. The reality of our world today is lots of people in India sitting here are doing SaaS companies from here. Now, in that case, it becomes challenge that you are launching a product in US, but then you're sitting here. And so some of the things which could be very, very easy for you to understand, for example, the example that I gave you, if I had launched something in India and that problem was there, the guy would have walked into another salon somewhere there and looked at, Acha, this is what is happening. Okay, good. It is a non-event, non-issue. But since in this case, the product is somewhere there, you don't even understand the basics of what happens there. And so therefore, it just becomes a challenge. But fundamentally, of course, none of these things are different. I mean, as in, you still have to understand, okay, what is the competitive landscape there? What kind of product is par? And what kind of product is a differentiated product, which is above par? Right? What are the dimensions you have to? And the PM has to do that kind of a market research. They have to understand the customer. They have to design their persona. They have to work with their UX team. They have to work with their engineering team to figure out what is the most compelling. So all of those aspects, I don't feel they are really dependent on, okay, you are in US, you are in India, your product is here. It doesn't matter. It just is a matter of understanding that space and that particular place where the product is supposed to be fitting, because ultimately you're driving for a product market fit. And that is what will drive. As such, it shouldn't be different. But I don't know if I answered your question, but that's my view.
So one last question I have for both of you is, so if some of our students or someone wants to be hired by your company as a product manager, what do you look in? What kind of skill set do you look in?
Yeah, so I think overall, like I said, I mean, we need that abstract thinking, right? Of the capability to take multiple patterns across multiple industries and make it general, right? Maybe it's not as easy, like that means that that pattern will work across all industries, right? So having that generic kind of thinking so that you're not building custom solutions for various companies, that is important in my view. Also, like I said, empathizing with the customer is very important. Having a business sense is very important. And, also understanding the business problems, learning how to price, it's an important point. And also always allowing your sales team to have like an upsell opportunity. So designing the right kind of feature set of trying to sell the feature set correctly. All of that is important, and also how effectively you're able to market your feature. So all of those nuances, I think, are important. I think we touched upon all of this in the past few minutes. But yeah, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. I don't know, Nityanjay, you wanna add?
Yeah, so I think if I look at Zenoti, and I'll make it concrete. So if let's say one of you come in and apply for a Zenoti place, and interview cycles will go on, I think our focus will be on 3 or 4 different very distinct things. And then I'll in a minute also come to, okay, once you come in, what do we expect you to do? Because some of these things cannot be judged in an interview. So we sort of take a leap of faith. But one thing that we want to understand is, are you able to model things? As in, lots of random stuff will be given to you by customers, as you said, abstract. Like, lots of inputs are coming in. Are you able to make sense of that? Because 10 people will say X, others will say Y, X may, and X and Y may not go together. Either you do X or you do Y. But are you able to make sense of these kind of things? And once you have made sense, can you articulate it very, very clearly so that everybody understands what it is? And typically when we do a case study based interviews, we will try to give you a problem and then we'll say all these things are happening and then we'll see some of those kind of things. But ultimate goal is, can you take all these kind of information, put them together in a model which can be understandable and you can articulate it well? Now, once you're doing that, then the second aspect will be, are you able to take it and put a solution which can be of value for some customer out there, which can pay for it, right? Because it could be value. Everything is value in that sense. And I've heard many PM say, okay, yeah, I'm doing this is useful. This guy was doing this guy was doing, now he can do this. Okay, fine, that's a value. But is he going to put money on the table and say, yes, if this value comes, I will pay you this. Otherwise, I will not. And we have had products. We have had our share in last 11 years where we have built products, gave it to the customer. Customer doesn't use it. So we said, okay, here is the money that we will charge you. They said, okay, I don't want it. And they don't say it. They just don't use it. Right? So be very, very careful about understanding the business side, understanding the customer again from the perspective of, yes, this is exactly what they want. It's a pain, it's a need. And then doing it. Again, some of these things are hard to do in interview, but typically we want this kind of a thing. And then the third aspect is, how well can you negotiate your way through? Because any decent size organization, even if there are 10 people, 15 people, there will be more than one people who will have an opinion on what needs to be done in what way or what problem needs to be solved. So you have to go and sort of negotiate your way. What I call as, okay, you have a product view, but then there is a negotiated product view. What gets built is a negotiated product. But you can't negotiate the soul of the product away. It's very easy to say, I talk to Vivek and Vivek says, nahi, ye nahi hoga. And you say, fine, take it, hata dete. You have to be very clear, okay, what is the essence? The strip of pieces. There is an essence to the product idea that you have got. You can strip away lots of things. The negotiation you can keep giving. Okay, legal says you can't do it this way, you have to charge no money to it. Maybe you can give it away, maybe you cannot. So you have to be very clear on what is the soul of my product, but be willing to trade off. Engineering will come and say, yeah, I can't do this. Right? Then you will come back and say, okay, fine, I can take this away. Is that okay? Is it easy? The guy will say, yeah. But you have to be very clear. If I take this away, do I have the essence of the product? If I have it, great, I continue. So being able to discern that, being able to negotiate your way through so that it can get built and you can reach the customer whose voice you sort of channelized into that product and then get the customer the same product. And hopefully your hypothesis was correct. The guy will pay value, money for it. And they did pay the money. And it didn't pay, of course, you have to learn and the whole cycle goes. So some will check your interview, some we will not. But essentially, this cycle is what we look for as individuals go forward in our company.
So if we consider a situation where there's a startup with just 10 to 15 people and there's one PM. So in this situation, does that for making decisions about his features, his future features, whether to implement or not. So can he depend on his instinct, whether to go with or not? Or should he confine to metrics, only metrics, and then take the decision? So yeah, just a small question.
Hello. Yeah. No, that is, like in most things, I think it's a combination. What will happen is, I think you'll have to definitely go by data. Going purely by instinct may not work, I think, but there is a angle of going by data. So try to bring data, try to bring customers into the picture. Try to bring other stakeholders, then maybe people who are like analysts and things like that. And basis that data, make an informed decision. That's what I would say. Uh, it's sometimes very easy to sort of just make decisions because this feels right. My in my limited experience, I've seen this, therefore this will feel right. But my sense is, try to be informed about it and have a framework. It is good to take a leap of faith, and it is necessary for you to do that many times as a product manager, because that is very critical. That's how you make decisions, right? You can't get stuck, to get proof for every single thing you do. Otherwise, you'll never be able to make progress. But it, yeah, making blind decisions is also sort of something that you should try and avoid. My sense is, it should be a combination.
I think with that, we end today's session. And I thank Mrityunjay and Vivek for taking your time. So it was a very short notice and it was very, very insightful. Thank you so much for joining. So we have a small token of appreciation from Triple I. So one big round of applause for both of them once again. So Vivek has been traveling a lot and he could give time, and Mrityunjay was very busy and somehow we could get their time, and I hope it was all useful for you guys. So I request all of you to join for a group photo, and